There are moments in history when God interrupts the noise, through Scripture, through circumstances, or sometimes through a dream, not to frighten us, but to awaken us. The dream wasn't about a single man, a political party, or an election. It was a warning about a nation standing at the edge of spiritual, moral, and societal collapse. And Donald Trump simply appeared as a symbol representing division, disruption, and the revealing of what has long been hidden. The real message wasn't about him. It was about us, about what happens when a nation forgets God, when pride replaces prayer, when comfort replaces conviction, and when truth becomes negotiable. This speech is not a prediction. It is a call to discernment, preparation, and unwavering faith before the shaking arrives. When God sends a dream, it rarely arrives to entertain the imagination. It arrives to interrupt the routine. It shows up like a knock at the door we didn't expect, at an hour we weren't prepared for. And the first instinct is often denial. Surely that wasn't God. Surely that wasn't meant for me. Surely that has nothing to do with what's happening in the world. But throughout Scripture, God has always chosen unusual pathways to get human attention. A burning bush for Moses, a blinding light for Paul, a whisper for Elijah, and yes, dreams for Joseph, Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, and the Magi. Not every dream is divine, but sometimes a dream carries weight, clarity, and urgency beyond human imagination. It pulls you out of the ordinary and asks a question you cannot ignore. And when that happens, wise people don't dismiss it. They discern it. This dream was not political, sensational, or dramatic for drama's sake. It didn't come with fireworks or headlines. It came the way warnings often do, quietly, with symbolism that felt unsettling, not because of fear, but because of recognition. Something in it felt familiar, as if our collective conscience already sensed what the dream confirmed. We feel the instability, we sense the division, we recognize that something in the nation is trembling beneath the surface, even if we can't explain it. The dream didn't introduce a new concern, it illuminated an old one we have been trying to avoid. When a nation becomes comfortable, spiritually numb, or overly confident in its own strength, God often issues a wake-up call, not as condemnation, but as mercy. That's the part we often overlook. Warnings are expressions of love. They mean God is still speaking, still reaching, still inviting. Silence is far more terrifying than correction. The dream was not given to foster panic, but perspective. It wasn't about predicting a moment on a calendar. It was about recognizing a moment in history, a moment when moral foundations are eroding, when truth feels negotiable, when outrage has replaced wisdom, and when people look to human leaders for what only God can give. We must understand something essential. Spiritual warnings rarely come when everything is falling apart. They come when everything still appears manageable, stable, even successful. That's why they are often ignored. People say, things look fine. Nothing catastrophic has happened. Why worry? But Scripture consistently shows that collapse begins long before anyone sees it. Samson didn't lose his strength when his hair was cut. He lost it the moment he began believing he didn't need God. Israel didn't fall because an army invaded. They fell because their hearts drifted. Rome didn't crumble from external enemies, but internal decay. The signs of decline, pride, confusion, division, moral fatigue, always appear before the consequences. And so the dream becomes a mirror. It forces us to stop asking what is happening to the nation and start asking what is happening to us. Because nations are not abstract. They are collections of souls, families, churches, communities, conversations, priorities, fears, desires, habits. If a nation is divided, it's because hearts are divided. If a nation is anxious, it's because people are anxious. If a nation is spiritually asleep, it's because individuals have silenced the inner voice calling them back to God. Dreams, like prophecy, are not designed to satisfy curiosity. They are designed to stir responsibility. The deeper message is not about forecasting events. It's about awakening discernment. Discernment is the ability to hear something before it becomes loud, to recognize danger before it becomes disaster, to sense spiritual drift before it becomes moral collapse. And discernment requires humility. It requires the courage to admit that we may have trusted the wrong things: politics, comfort, wealth, security, personalities, or national identity. It requires acknowledging that even nations considered powerful, exceptional, or blessed are not exempt from consequences when they walk away from truth. If God wanted to terrify us, He would remain silent. Silence leaves people unprepared. But God warns because He intends to prepare. He intends to save. He intends to realign His people before the shaking arrives. And sometimes the loudest alarm is not a headline. It's a dream that won't leave your spirit. So the question becomes, what will we do with the warning? Will we shrug it off, debate it, politicize it, or wait for someone else to respond? Or will we pause long enough to listen, to pray, to reflect, to examine the condition of our own hearts? Because real change always begins internally before it manifests externally. God may use dreams to alert a nation, but He uses awakened individuals to transform it. And maybe that is the true assignment, not to fear the coming collapse, but to ensure we are spiritually awake before it arrives. Because the greatest danger is not what may happen to the nation. The greatest danger is refusing to believe that God is speaking. Every warning from heaven carries an invitation, and the invitation is simple: wake up before the shaking comes. When we look at the figure of Donald Trump in the context of this dream, it's vital to understand the distinction between symbol and salvation. The dream did not arrive to elevate any one person to a status of hero or villain. It came to reveal something deeper about the collective state of the nation, about the undercurrents of division and the hidden truths that often go unspoken. Trump, in this vision, is less a leader and more a mirror, a reflection of realities that have long existed but have often been ignored, rationalized, or hidden behind political narratives. His presence is striking not because of who he is personally, but because of what he exposes. And in that exposure, God's warning comes into focus. Symbols have a unique power. Unlike a person who can be praised or criticized, a symbol forces us to examine what it represents. In this case, Trump represents the tensions, conflicts, and contradictions within the nation itself. He represents the pride that has replaced humility, the outrage that has replaced dialogue, the mistrust that has replaced understanding. The dream asks us to step back and see that these are not personal failings. They are collective, systemic, and spiritual. And while it may be tempting to assign blame or to idolize a figure who promises solutions, the dream insists we look at what lies beneath: a society teetering between unity and fracture, truth and distortion, compassion and self-interest. There is a profound psychological truth embedded in this symbol. Humans naturally seek a focal point for complex problems, a leader to champion their fears and aspirations, a figure to embody hope or resentment. But relying on a single person to carry the weight of a nation's moral, spiritual, and social equilibrium is a dangerous illusion. Leaders come and go. They are flawed, human, and influenced by the same societal pressures that shape the rest of us. The dream reminds us that when a leader rises to prominence, it often reflects more about the people who elevate them than about the leader themselves. Trump's prominence, therefore, is a lens through which we can examine our own priorities, our own choices, and our own spiritual condition. Philosophically, this distinction between symbol and salvation is crucial. Salvation, in the truest sense, is never found in a human being. It is found in alignment with God, in obedience to truth, and in the integrity of the soul. When we mistake a personality for providence, we risk distraction, disillusionment, and misplaced trust. The dream subtly yet powerfully warns against this mistake. It encourages discernment, reflection, and the courage to confront uncomfortable realities without the crutch of partisanship or personal loyalty. It challenges us to see the unfolding events as invitations to self-examination rather than as endorsements or condemnations of individuals. The dream also illuminates a critical philosophical and moral lesson. Exposure precedes correction. Trump, in this symbolic role, functions as a revelator. What has been hidden, anger, division, unhealed wounds, and fractured relationships, becomes visible, and visibility is the first step toward transformation. Before a society can heal, it must first acknowledge the fractures that have been quietly eroding its foundation. The dream insists that the focus should not be on the personality presenting the reflection, but on the condition of the reflection itself. What it reveals about us is far more important than what it says about any single person. In practical terms, this insight calls for responsibility. We are invited to move from passive observation to active discernment. Instead of channeling all energy into defending or attacking a figure, the dream encourages a deeper engagement, the work of personal and collective renewal. It is a call to cultivate wisdom, to pursue truth, to act with integrity, and to restore relationships that have been strained by pride, fear, or indifference. In doing so, we participate in the shaping of a future that is resilient, ethical, and aligned with eternal principles. Ultimately, the dream's message is profoundly liberating. We are reminded that no individual, no matter how prominent or controversial, controls the ultimate trajectory of a nation. God remains sovereign, and His vision for justice, righteousness, and restoration transcends any temporal leader. Symbols like Trump serve a purpose. They awaken awareness, highlight weaknesses, and reveal opportunities for transformation. But they are not the destination. The destination is the renewed heart, the awakened conscience, and the faithful citizenry capable of steering the nation back to its moral and spiritual foundations. So as we reflect on this, let us not be captivated by personalities or seduced by spectacle. Let us see clearly what is being revealed, take responsibility for our own role in what has been exposed, and commit ourselves to alignment with truth. Because when a nation confronts its reflection honestly, it opens the door not to despair, but to the possibility of profound renewal. And in that renewal, the power to shape a better future lies not in the hands of one person, but in the awakened hearts of many. The message is simple yet urgent. Recognize the mirror, confront what it reveals, and let it guide the work of transformation in your own life and in the life of your nation. When we talk about the coming collapse, it is essential to understand that its roots are far deeper than politics, economics, or even the structures of government. The dream makes this abundantly clear. The true collapse is spiritual before it ever becomes visible in streets, markets, or headlines. Nations, like people, deteriorate from the inside out. History teaches us this lesson repeatedly. Rome, despite its vast armies and wealth, fell because moral decay had hollowed out its core. Israel, powerful and chosen, faltered not because of external enemies, but because their hearts wandered. The dream is asking us to look beyond the obvious, to peer beneath the surface of society, and to confront the spiritual realities that are quietly reshaping our nation. A spiritual collapse does not begin with laws or economies. It begins with priorities and values. When truth becomes negotiable, when principles are secondary to convenience, and when fear or comfort guides decisions instead of wisdom and conscience, the foundation begins to crack. People begin to compromise integrity for approval, expedience, or gain. When that happens collectively, the nation itself becomes vulnerable. The dream warns us that this erosion is subtle, often unnoticed until the cracks are wide enough that recovery is no longer simple. And the tragedy is that these cracks rarely come from outside attack. They are self-inflicted, the cumulative result of choices, attitudes, and neglect. Psychologically, humans are wired to resist acknowledging decay, especially when it challenges our sense of security or identity. We rationalize, ignore, or blame others for the visible consequences while the real problem lies within. The dream serves as a mirror, forcing us to confront what we often avoid, that spiritual disconnection from God, from moral compass, and from authentic community, is the invisible threat that destabilizes everything else. Economics may falter, governments may stumble, and elections may polarize, but these are merely symptoms. The disease has been growing silently in the hearts and minds of citizens, in families, in communities, and even within institutions that were meant to guide and uphold moral order. Philosophically, this brings an urgent lesson. Stability without virtue is an illusion. A nation may appear strong because it has resources, influence, or even external success, but without a foundation anchored in truth, integrity, and reverence for God, it is inherently fragile. The dream is a call to recalibrate our vision, to recognize that national strength is not measured by military might, economic output, or political dominance, but by the collective moral and spiritual health of its people. Leaders can craft policy, but they cannot instill conscience. Laws can regulate behavior, but they cannot cultivate virtue. When internal decay outpaces external order, the inevitable collapse is not a question of if, it is a question of when. The spiritual collapse described in the dream also has a relational dimension. When society loses its ethical bearings, the ties that bind communities weaken. Trust erodes, compassion diminishes, and empathy becomes conditional. People stop seeing one another as neighbors or brothers and sisters and begin seeing each other as obstacles, competitors, or threats. Families fray, friendships fracture, and the sense of collective responsibility dissolves. The dream is warning that the cracks we see in public institutions are often mirrored by the fractures in private life, and that the path to restoration begins with repairing the human connections that are being eroded by selfishness, fear, and neglect. But the message is not merely one of despair, it is a call to action. Spiritual collapse, like moral or physical illness, presents an opportunity for awakening and renewal. The dream insists that the first response cannot be panic, blame, or denial. It must be introspection, acknowledgement, and alignment. Every individual who chooses to embrace truth, to act with integrity, and to prioritize conscience over convenience contributes to the stabilization of society as a whole. Recovery begins with self-examination, with recommitment to principles that withstand pressure, and with courage to uphold values even when it is unpopular or inconvenient. There is also hope embedded in this warning. God does not allow collapse without offering a path toward restoration. The shaking, the exposure of weaknesses, and the revelation of moral frailty are intended to redirect, not destroy. The dream communicates that even in the midst of impending instability, those who anchor themselves spiritually, who commit to truth, who cultivate resilience in character, and who act with courage will become the stabilizing force that allows the nation to endure, recover, and even thrive. The dream reminds us that the external signs, the economic volatility, political turmoil, social unrest, are the echoes of internal erosion. If we want to prevent or mitigate the visible collapse, we must address the invisible one first. It begins with our own hearts, our families, our communities, and our faith. Every choice to live ethically, to speak truthfully, to love unconditionally, and to stand for justice contributes to the fortification of the society at large. The takeaway is clear: the coming collapse is spiritual before it is political or economic. If we ignore the inner deterioration, the outer consequences are inevitable. But if we awaken, align, and act with courage and conviction, we can weather the storm, heal the fractures, and participate in the restoration of a nation in peril. The call is urgent yet empowering. Attend to the heart, strengthen your foundation, and live in such a way that when the shaking comes, you are not swept away, but anchored firmly in what cannot be moved. When we consider the idea of collapse or upheaval, it is natural to recoil, to feel fear, or to seek someone or something to blame. But the dream delivers a profoundly different perspective. God allows shaking, not merely to punish, but to redirect, to purify, and ultimately to restore. This is a spiritual principle woven throughout Scripture. Every trial, every challenge, every disruption carries a dual purpose. It exposes what is weak, and it invites transformation. The shaking is never random. It is intentional. It is calibrated. And it is an invitation to see reality through the lens of eternity, not just the immediacy of circumstance. Think about the physical world for a moment. When a tree faces strong winds, the branches that are brittle break away while the roots grow stronger, digging deeper into the soil. The shaking is not the enemy, the weakness was already there. The wind simply reveals it and gives the tree the opportunity to reinforce itself. In the same way, nations, communities, and individuals experience shaking not as arbitrary disaster, but as a diagnostic, a signal of what needs attention, repair, and alignment with enduring principles. The dream communicates that much of the unrest, confusion, or turmoil we anticipate is not purely destructive, it is corrective, aimed at exposing what is unstable and preparing what is lasting. Psychologically, humans resist this process because disruption threatens comfort, pride, and perceived control. We naturally crave stability, predictability, and security. When those are interrupted, the instinct is often to react defensively, to blame, to complain, to avoid. But spiritual insight calls us to pause, to reflect, and to ask, what is God revealing in this shaking? What is He calling me to examine, to correct, to strengthen? The dream presses this point because it is easy to focus on the external, on political outcomes, economic fluctuations, or social unrest, while missing the internal lesson entirely. The real work is in our hearts, our perspectives, our priorities, and the way we respond to the revelation of weakness. Philosophically, the principle is timeless. Collapse or disruption is not merely an event to endure. It is an opportunity to discern. God shakes not to annihilate, but to illuminate. He shakes to pry loose misplaced trust, to challenge misplaced confidence, and to redirect attention to what is eternal rather than temporary. When Scripture speaks of trials producing perseverance, character, and hope, it is emphasizing the transformative potential inherent in disruption. The dream mirrors this truth, reminding us that the chaos we fear is often the crucible in which resilience, wisdom, and clarity are forged. This concept also reframes the way we view leadership, institutions, and societal structures. No government, organization, or person is perfect. Shaking exposes flaws not to humiliate or destroy, but to refine. The dream illustrates that crises are revealing. They expose where our dependence has been misplaced and where realignment with higher principles is required. Just as a blacksmith's fire reveals impurities in metal, the disruptions of society reveal the cracks in character, policy, and collective conscience. And just as the metal becomes stronger after it is purified, nations, communities, and individuals have the potential to emerge more resilient, informed, and grounded when they respond correctly to shaking. There is a deeply spiritual dimension to this as well. God's purpose is never merely punitive. The shaking is always accompanied by the invitation to return, to reassess, to rebuild on the foundation of truth, integrity, and faithfulness. For those willing to listen, the shaking is a gift, a wake-up call, a realignment, a chance to shed what is superficial, fleeting, or false. Those who embrace it are positioned to become the stabilizing force in a world that often seeks security in unstable places. The dream insists on this perspective. What appears destructive in the short term can be redemptive in the long term, provided we respond with wisdom, humility, and courage. In practical terms, this means cultivating awareness and readiness. It means examining personal habits, relationships, decisions, and priorities. It means acknowledging weaknesses and taking steps to reinforce foundations before the shaking becomes unbearable. It also means developing spiritual and moral discernment, the ability to distinguish between temporary discomfort that is part of refinement and permanent threats that require immediate action. The dream underscores that the shaking itself is not the punishment. Failure to heed it, to learn from it, and to align with God's truth is where true danger lies. Ultimately, the message is one of hope and empowerment. Shaking is not the end of the story, it is the turning point. It is the moment where preparation meets opportunity, where vigilance meets transformation, and where faith meets action. The dream reminds us that while collapse may come, the purpose behind it is always rooted in restoration, not ruin. It calls us to lean into the process, to trust the guiding hand behind the disruption, and to actively participate in the work of strengthening what is lasting, true, and right. So the lesson is clear: when life shakes, do not despair, do not curse the disruption or flee from it. Instead, pay attention. Examine what it reveals, reinforce what is weak, and allow the shaking to purify and fortify you. God does not shake to destroy, He shakes to prepare, to awaken, and to restore. The challenge and the invitation is this: embrace the shaking with discernment, fortify your foundations with courage, and let the turbulence become the catalyst that transforms weakness into strength, fear into faith, and uncertainty into unwavering hope. When a nation begins to tremble, when institutions falter, and when uncertainty spreads through communities, the natural instinct for many is to retreat, to seek comfort in silence, or to look for someone else to fix the problems. But the dream presents a challenge, one that is profoundly urgent. The church must rise as a moral anchor when everything else seems unsteady. This is not a call for spectacle, for political maneuvering, or for prominence. It is a call for courage, clarity, and constancy, an invitation to stand steadfast when the world is tempted to compromise, to remain unwavering when morality is questioned, and to act decisively when truth is under siege. We live in an era when society increasingly questions what is right and wrong, and where personal convenience often outweighs collective responsibility. The dream reveals that the erosion of moral clarity is not simply a political issue, it is a spiritual one. And when spiritual guidance is absent or silent, chaos inevitably fills the void. In such moments, the church, the people of faith, and those committed to principles of justice and integrity are called to serve as a steadying force. The anchor must not be ideology or personality, but unwavering commitment to truth, compassion, and God's wisdom. Without such an anchor, the nation drifts, vulnerable to currents of division, fear, and moral compromise. Psychologically, this responsibility is both daunting and empowering. On the one hand, it requires courage to speak truth when it is unpopular, to act ethically when expedience tempts us otherwise, and to lead when others are tempted to follow the crowd. On the other hand, it grants profound agency, the ability to influence not just individual lives, but communities, institutions, and ultimately the moral trajectory of a nation. The dream communicates a powerful truth. When faith and conviction rise to meet societal turbulence, they do more than resist decay. They create stability, resilience, and hope for those around them. A single principled voice in the midst of confusion has the power to redirect conversation, restore values, and rekindle courage in others. Philosophically, the church's role as moral anchor is rooted in timeless principles. History demonstrates that societies without moral compass eventually fracture under the weight of greed, pride, and fear. Empires crumble not because of external enemies alone, but because their inner integrity has been compromised. The dream emphasizes that the responsibility to anchor morality does not lie solely with leaders, politicians, or institutions. It lies with every individual who carries the wisdom of truth, the courage of conviction, and the compassion to act rightly in the midst of challenge. Faith is not passive, it is active. It engages, intervenes, corrects, and restores. Moreover, the church's role in times of uncertainty extends beyond judgment. It encompasses guidance, healing, and reconciliation. When divisions deepen and relationships fracture, the anchor must provide grounding, reminding people of shared humanity and shared responsibility. The dream underscores that a moral anchor is not merely a voice of condemnation, but a source of clarity, hope, and direction. It models integrity, demonstrates courage, and offers a path forward amid complexity. In doing so, it cultivates resilience not only in individuals, but in the wider society, creating an ethical framework that withstands pressure and provides stability when everything else shakes. The dream also challenges the church to avoid complicity. Silence in the face of moral compromise, indifference to injustice, or disengagement from the challenges of society is not neutral. It contributes to the drift, allowing values and principles to erode unnoticed. The anchor is effective not because it is loud, but because it is consistent, deliberate, and rooted in truth. Its strength comes from the willingness to act ethically, to speak courageously, and to remain faithful even when doing so is inconvenient or contested. The dream insists that the church must lead not by coercion, but by example, drawing others into alignment with enduring principles through integrity and vision. Practically, this call to anchor morality manifests in everyday life, in families, workplaces, neighborhoods, and public discourse. Each interaction, each decision, each act of integrity strengthens the foundation of the broader society. The dream communicates that collective influence begins with individual responsibility. When individuals uphold truth, justice, and compassion consistently, they stabilize communities. When they falter, the ripples of compromise spread quickly. The power of the church's moral anchor lies in this ripple effect, the aggregation of countless choices made with integrity, courage, and commitment to higher principles. Ultimately, the dream conveys an urgent truth. Collapse may be imminent, and institutions may falter, but the presence of principled, faithful individuals has the power to stabilize a nation. Anchoring morality is not optional. It is essential. It is not reactive. It is proactive. It is not performative. It is transformative. The church and people of faith are called to rise, to lead, and to stand firm, providing the clarity, courage, and resilience necessary to weather turbulence, repair fractures, and guide the nation toward renewal. The challenge is immediate yet profoundly empowering. Become the moral anchor your family, community, and nation desperately need. Stand with courage, act with conviction, and live with integrity. Because when the world wavers, your steadfastness can steady not only yourself, but countless others who are waiting for an example to follow. The invitation is clear. Anchor your life in truth, rise in courage, and let your faith be the force that stabilizes a nation in the midst of uncertainty. As we reflect on the dream and its warnings, it is crucial to understand one enduring truth: hope is never found in leaders, policies, or human institutions. The dream emphasizes that ultimate security, guidance, and restoration rest not in personalities or political agendas, but in the God who appoints and oversees the unfolding of history. This is a lesson that runs through Scripture from beginning to end. Kings rise and fall, governments collapse, and empires crumble. Yet the sovereignty of God remains unchanged. The message is simple yet profound. When we place ultimate trust in human hands, we are destined for disappointment. When we place our trust in God, even the shaking and uncertainty of life become opportunities for growth, clarity, and renewal. Humans have a natural tendency to seek security in tangible figures. A president, a prime minister, a leader who promises change, stability, or salvation. Politically, emotionally, and even spiritually, we are drawn to personalities who seem capable of fixing what feels broken. But this reliance is fraught with danger. No single human being can embody the moral, spiritual, and social resilience required to sustain a nation or to resolve its deepest crises. The dream makes it clear that while leaders may influence circumstances, they do not determine destiny. Destiny, particularly the spiritual destiny of a people, is guided by God's hand. The moment we realize this, we shift from dependence on the temporary to alignment with the eternal. Psychologically, the temptation to idolize leaders or assign ultimate responsibility to them is understandable. It provides a sense of control, a concrete target, and a simplified narrative. Yet the dream challenges this impulse. It calls us to discernment, to see leaders as instruments, not as saviors. Trump, as he appears in the vision, is not a source of salvation. He is a mirror, an agent revealing societal fractures, a symbol reflecting both the strengths and the weaknesses of the people he leads. The moment we transfer ultimate hope or fear onto any person, we abdicate our own responsibility to act, to discern, and to align with truth. The dream urges us to wake up from this illusion. Philosophically, this perspective is liberating. It frees us from the cycle of despair and disillusionment that accompanies every political disappointment or social upheaval. When we anchor our hope in God rather than in fallible humans, we are not powerless in the face of turmoil. Rather, we are empowered to respond wisely, courageously, and faithfully. The dream reminds us that collapse, corruption, and conflict, while deeply unsettling, do not dictate our ultimate future. What matters is how we live, how we respond, and where we place our trust. When God remains the ultimate authority in our lives, we are anchored even when the world around us seems unmoored. Spiritually, this has profound implications. The dream communicates that God is not passive. He is actively orchestrating the unfolding of events. What appears chaotic is often a carefully calibrated sequence in His larger plan. He permits challenges to arise, not to abandon His people, but to awaken them, strengthen them, and prepare them for the work He intends. The collapse we see, the upheaval we fear, and the uncertainty that surrounds us are not signs of divine neglect. They are opportunities for alignment, reflection, and growth. God's sovereignty assures us that no matter how volatile circumstances appear, there is order, purpose, and meaning behind it all. This understanding also empowers us to act with wisdom and responsibility. Trust in God does not mean passivity. On the contrary, it demands engagement, discernment, and courage. It calls us to uphold truth, extend compassion, and contribute to the moral and spiritual fortification of our communities. The dream emphasizes that leadership, justice, and restoration are ultimately collaborative. God works through those who respond faithfully, who act justly, and who remain steadfast in principle. Our hope is not in waiting for someone else to fix the nation, but in aligning ourselves with God's truth and allowing His guidance to flow through us to those around us. The dream concludes by highlighting the stark contrast between temporary power and eternal authority. Human leaders come and go, nations rise and fall, yet the God who governs history remains unshaken, unthreatened, and unwavering in His commitment to His people. When we internalize this truth, fear loses its grip, confusion becomes a call to discernment, and uncertainty transforms into opportunity. Our responsibility is clear. We must remain anchored in the eternal, guided by principles that withstand time, circumstance, and crisis. So, as we consider the unfolding events, the instability, and the symbolic presence of figures like Trump in this dream, the ultimate message is a call to perspective, faith, and action. Do not place your hope in a person, a policy, or a fleeting system. Place it in the God who sees all, orchestrates all, and sustains all. The dream urges us to anchor ourselves spiritually, to act courageously, and to live with integrity, knowing that the future is ultimately in the hands of the one who cannot fail. The reflection is simple but transformative. Hope anchored in God is unshakable. Purpose guided by God is unstoppable. And faith aligned with God is the true source of strength when the world trembles.